All right, welcome everybody to episode 4. We're finally there and we're going to be dealing with the MySQL database install for our web server. I'm going to jump in pretty quick today. We're going to set up our server, we'll update our server, we'll build MySQL, and we'll create a user account in our database, and we'll do some cleanup. So this should be a pretty quick walkthrough of installing MySQL. It's pretty straightforward, but it's an important part when we start installing WordPress, which is where we'll be probably tomorrow. We'll do some firewall stuff tomorrow, and we'll set up WordPress, and we'll be good to go, and then you can start developing. So let's jump right in. All right. Welcome back. So what you'll notice on my screen is different than what we've been looking at before. Number one, I can see you, or you can see me. The other one is I'm working in a Windows environment. As I've been setting up my streaming environment, it means I've had to move over a little bit so that I can start setting up for some questions and answer sessions that I'm thinking about doing over on Twitch for you guys. So real quick, let's talk about what you have in front of you. There's a WinSSH term is the application that I'm using to connect back and do SSH or SCP over to our web server. So let's go ahead and connect and we'll get started. All right, now that we're connected here, I'm going to go ahead and sudo, and we'll do just update or apt update and get that running. This is a good habit to do this every time you install something, to go in and update that. It says we have 2 packages, so the next package will go in and update that as well. So we'll say sudo upgrade, and we'll run that, and we'll install those packages as well. So if you're not familiar with MySQL, one of the things that we'll be doing is creating a database, setting up some users, changing permissions, and we'll actually go through and do a little bit of hardening on that with some built-in capabilities that MySQL has. Now, by far, it's not going to be the only way you go along and harden MySQL. We're going to stand up firewall rules and all kinds of stuff on the back end. All right, so let's go ahead and reboot. And we'll get our server restarting so that we can go ahead and jump in. So I'm gonna fast forward through this piece, and when we have our connection back up, I'll bring you back. All right, we're back. So let's go ahead and jump in. I'm gonna sudo bash over so I can be at root for the commands that we're going to be doing, and we're just going to install. So I'm going to say apt install, and not opt, apt install, and we're going to say MySQL, and then we're going to say server. So we want the server install of this. So we'll go ahead and say yes, and this is the base install, no special repositories, no nothing. This comes with Ubuntu 18.4. With the built-in repository. So we're just going to install right here with the latest version that's in the repository. All right, and we're all set. So the next thing we want to do is just make sure that we secure it. So it's all installed, we're good to go. Let's go ahead and start securing and locking down MySQL. So we're going to say MySQL _ secure installation. And if you want to know how I did that, you start typing and you can hit your tab key and it'll finish it. And if you hit it a couple of times, it'll give you all the options for that. So right here, we're going to say MySQL secure, and this is going to remove a bunch of like anonymous accounts, test databases, make sure that you're using good passwords, or at least what used to be good passwords, and that sort of stuff. So let's jump into this. So the first thing it's going to ask us is, do we want to validate our password? Do we want to validate password plugin running? And we're going to say absolutely yes, we do. Now it's going to say that it's only 8 characters and it has complexity, and we know that longer passwords are more secure than shorter ones with complexity, but we get to do both. We might as well add it if we have that functionality. And you'll see here that we have either in our low, medium, or strong. We wouldn't be doing this if we didn't want strong, so we're going to do that. It's going to ask for a new password. And I bet I fat fingered that. Hold on. All right, so it says that our password strength is 100, so that's good. That's the best you can get. And I think I used 12 or 14 characters in that, and I want to use the one that I provided, not the one that's in there. So we're gonna say yes, we wanna use that password, and that's great. So the next is, do we wanna remove anonymous users? Of course we do. We don't want those guys there. Do we want to disallow root to log in remotely? Absolutely. We do not want root logging in remotely. We'll create a user to do that if we need to. Do we want to remove the test database and all access to it? Absolutely. We don't need test databases. And we're going to reload all the tables. That's it. Now, like I said, it adds some security, not all of it, but every little bit counts as we start building this defensive layer as we go step by step by step through this process. All right, so the next thing we want to do is actually connect to our MySQL database. So we're going to say MySQL-U, and we're going to connect as root. U stands for user, and we're going to use a password to authenticate. So we'll have to enter in our password. And we are in, so we are good to go. So right now, the next thing that we want to do is we want to create a database for WordPress. So that's a really easy command where you're just going to say create. That makes sense, right? Database. Not anything fancy. And what should we name our database? Let's call our database WordPress underscore DB. And there's a reason I like to do the underscore DB. Here, because if you create a username WordPress and your database is named WordPress, then things can get confusing. So I like to say that this is a database, even though we know it is. And you'll notice that I put a semicolon at the end. If you're not familiar with SQL, that's sort of like your enter key. You put it at the end of the statement and say, I'm finished. If you don't put it there, it's going to return to the next line, and then you can add more comments before you finish your command. So here we go. We're going to say create our database. Excellent. So let's just make sure we're good. We're going to say show databases, plural. Oops. That wouldn't be good, would it? And there you'll see it. We have our WordPress database and it's been created. So the next thing we want to do is create a user to access this database, the WordPress database. And we want to make sure that it only has access to WordPress. So we don't want it to be a root account where they can get to everything. We do want them to have all administrative privileges for that one database. So we're going to grant privileges to a new user. So we can grant the privileges and create the user at the same time using the command grant. So we're going to say grant. These don't have to be capital. I'm just trying to do it so you can see what are the commands inside and what we're entering. So we're going to say grant all, which is all privileges, on, and we're going to say what database? Well, we said WordPress, right? Underscore DB is our database, and we're just going to say everything about it. So the whole database, everything we're going to grant privileges for, and then we're going to say, okay, who do we want to give those privileges to? So we're going to grant all the privileges on WordPress database, right? And then we're going to say, but who are we granting them to? So basically we're going to say to. Makes sense, right? And we're going to create a user. So let's say our user is just WP admin. And I don't want that to be caps. WP admin, right? And we want it to be on the local host. So we're going to say at, and we're going to say localhost. That way we know it's just local and it's on this machine, not on some other machine. Identified, and we want it to be by password, right? So the way you do that is going in and you say, hey, it's going to be identified by, and we're going to put in a password. So let's create something that's somewhat complex, but is pretty easy for us to remember. This isn't on the live server, by the way. If you see there's a John Wally and a WebServe, I spun off a copy of WebServe so that we could work on that so that the passwords aren't the same as what's out there in the real world. That would be really, really bad. So this is just for us playing here and learning here until we move over and we start working with WordPress. So identified by, let's say that it's something like let's do lowercase, my pass for SQL and WordPress. How about that? And then we're just gonna say the end. Now let's check our syntax real quick. Grant all on, WordPress all, to WP admin, which is our new user that we're creating right now, at localhost, and both have single quotes around them, identified by, and our password. So we should be good to go. All right, all good. So now we've created a user in there to do that. So let's go ahead and just to double check, we're gonna say show grant, because we granted something to somebody, right? For, and we're gonna look for a specific user. So we're gonna say for WP admin at localhost. And just make sure that I have all the permissions for that. Excellent. So there we go. So we're all set up, it's good to go, and we can see the actual database. Now we could try to log in and that sort of stuff, but we can see it right here that we're good and that we're running. So the last thing that we want to do is actually flush the privileges just to make sure that everything is good. So we're going to say flush, and then we're going to say privileges. So it's P-R-I-V. All right. And we're good. So we flushed our privileges and now we can exit. All right. So that is as simple as that. Now we can do a couple of things and make sure. So I'm going to go over, if you remember our command, netstat. And I'm going to say plant. And we're going to look to make sure that WordPress is actually, that not WordPress, but MySQL is actually listening. We can see it right there. So MySQL is listening. If you don't want to see all of that stuff on the screen, we could always grep that. And we could say MySQL. And then you'll see that it's listening on 3306. So that we know it's up, it's running. We checked our database. We have the right user in there. And we know that the process is actually running because it's there. Now we could go out and do a ps-aux and look for MySQL as well. If you wanted to, it looks like this, aux, and then we'll just grep. And you'll see that the process is running as well and who it's running under. So thank you again for joining me today. This has been a great exercise, and I'm looking forward to our next episode. If you have any comments or any questions, please feel free to leave them below, either on the johnwally.com or on YouTube as you're watching this video. If you have any feedback, I'd love to hear that as well. And as always, on the YouTube side, if you can hit that subscribe button and that little alert bell, that would be great. Thank you, and I will see you guys tomorrow.